I think it's bracing. And what's another good? What's a positive spin? Um, Invigorating is probably not quite right. It's brisk. It's brisk, like the iced tea. No, yeah, I would agree. It's been a wind all week. Like, I'd look at the temperature and say like 54. I'm like, 54 is not bad. That's like light jacket or nothing, or just a regular shirt. Not nothing, but look at, just. And then I walked outside and getting blasted with like Arctic winds. I thought, maybe I'll put a coat on after all. It's not the heat, it's the humidity, and it's not the cold, it's the wind, right? I wonder if I should ask whether we're on the internet. Are we on the internet? Okay, cool. I don't mean in general, I mean this morning. Oh, fantastic. So, fortunately for some of our people streaming with us online, they too get to hear me talk about the weather, which is, I know, the real reason you guys come to Bible study. All right, we are studying the book of Genesis. We'll do maybe a quick fly through and then get to where we're heading. The first portion of the book really doesn't linger long on any particular character. Adam and Eve, of course, are an important part of the story. But again, we only really get 2 accounts out of their life. And then Cain and Abel, you get 1 story basically, genealogy. The first character that we really land on for any length of time is Noah. And you could say, well, we all trace our lineage back to Adam and Eve. And that's true. But you could also probably say we all trace our lineage back to Noah. So the world starts over with Noah, and the reason why is because it had gotten so wicked so fast. I mean, it was awful. When you get to somebody like, we've talked about Lamech quite a bit, Lamech sort of positions himself like a mafia don or something, It's like, you disrespected my house, so I'll just kill you. But that's sort of the way that wickedness is demonstrated to us. It's, wickedness is principally the elevation of yourself over everybody else. If you want a really simple idea of what wickedness in the Bible is, it's that. It's selfishness, ultimately. And in fact, it's even one of the ways you can describe sin, and I don't think this is comprehensive, but one of the ways you can describe sin is being bent back upon yourself. What it means to be a sinner, at least from some angles, would be that you put yourself in the position of God. And that's what we see going back as far as Adam and Eve, and it's the problem everybody always has. When we got to the Tower of Babel, we see that sort of thinking again. Mankind said, let us make a name for ourselves. Let's build a monument to ourselves so that we won't be scattered and we won't be forgotten. And so they sought to build a tower up to heaven. And when I frame it that way, it sounds like they're literally trying to make like a sky elevator to get to where God is. I'm not sure that was literally true. But there is definitely a sense of the literal elevation of self, like what we might call like humanism in our modern day. The idea that we are the highest authority And there is nothing eternal unless you can make a legacy for yourself that outlives you. But also, even though I think the Tower of Babel was a literal story that actually happened, I think we could talk about its symbolic significance too, right? Literally, man is trying to raise himself up to, he's trying to raise himself above his station. And the progress of technology is unbelievable in those early generations. They go from, nothing, getting off the boat with a bunch of animals, to building, massive, a skyscraper essentially. And I don't think the Bible is anti-technology by any stretch. But the story of the Tower of Babel really does stand as a warning that technology won't actually save you. Right? It's meant to be a tool, right? Science is meant to be a tool. Mathematics is a tool. What matters is what is in service to what, I definitely tried to draw some parallels between the Tower of Babel and our modern world. And so just in brief, what I hope you come away with is some discernment and care as new technologies are arising. Not that all new technologies are bad, but as soon as you're hoping to find salvation and the answers in those things, you're giving a place to something made by human hands that properly belongs to God, and that is idolatry. And idolatry never works out well in the long term. And it usually doesn't work out very well in the short term. Actually, let's take a minute on idolatry as a concept, because I think this is really worth exploring before we go any farther. You can divide people's beliefs in a number of ways. You could say, well, there's people who believe in some kind of God and people who believe in no God. That'd be one way to divide, right? Another way to say is, there's people who look at religion as a explanation for the universe, and then there's others that look at it as a useful tool for self-improvement or for the benefit of society. Christians usually will divide religions along this axis. There is one true God, and there's those who believe in him, and there's everybody else. As a Christian pastor, I will tell you that is probably the best way to make those divisions. Because if we understand that apart from what shape you think it has, everybody has a God, because everybody has a highest authority and a thing that they look to for all of the answers and for all the blessings in life. So even somebody who says they are atheistic, there's something that they'll put in that place. It might be human reason, it might be the scientific method, it might be some particular philosophy that they follow, be it Stoicism or Marxism or whatever it is, right? There is something that they put in that position of highest authority. So for us, it's helpful to think of there's one true God, and there's all the other false gods, even for those who claim to have no God. And the dividing line between those two we could say, well, there's the real God and then there's all the false gods. So that would be one dividing line. But there's also a way that you can divide them by character. Every other god is demanding of you. And for those of us who will put ourselves in the position of God, which we all tend to do from time to time, what you'll discover is you're less gracious than he is. You are a harsher God than he is. Every God is. Have you all ever seen Bruce Almighty? The Jim Carrey movie where he gets to play God for a short time? I'm not recommending it to you necessarily. I'm not saying this is required, theology for you. Sort of the bottom line of that movie is the character Bruce learns that actually being God's kind of a hard job. That's sort of the punchline of the movie. But that's a worthwhile point, because you think, well, sure, if I had unlimited knowledge and unlimited power, I could probably do that God job pretty well. You wouldn't. I'm sorry. Right? You are not as merciful. You're not as compassionate. You're not as kind. I mean, who among us would do what Christ did? So, when Scripture talks about God being a jealous God, it's not because he has a fragile ego. It's that he has compassion, and he knows what all of the other gods will do to you, even if you yourself are that God. All right. Tower of Babel, genealogies. We finally get to talk about Abram. So we had one beginning. Remember, Genesis is the book of beginning, right? We had one beginning, which is the creation of the world. We had the beginning of mankind in Adam and Eve. We have a new beginning in Noah as creation is washed clean and a new life is given. In Abram, we get yet another beginning, right? And this will be the beginning of what I will call the Hebrew people. Eventually, we can talk about them as being the Israelites. But we can't say that yet. Why not? Was that? Yeah, Israel hasn't been born yet, right? But we can call them Hebrews because Abram settles in a place called Hebron. Yeah, that's right. And it's from there that they'll get the name Hebrews. So we're at sort of the beginning of Abram's story. He is a full-grown man. How old is he? He's 75, I think, when he is called by God to leave the house of his father. And his father, Terah, had been making the journey toward Canaan and stopped along the way and settled there. God says to Abram, I'm going to take you someplace. You're going to follow me. It's pretty open-ended. He doesn't say, I'm taking you to Canaan. He is, but he doesn't say that. He just says, you're just going to have to take your stuff, leave. I'll bless you, okay? And I will bless the world through you. And anybody who curses you, I will curse. So Abram takes his wife Sarai. They're both old. They have no kids. But God says, I'm going to make a nation for you, okay? So Abram leaves, and he leaves with Sarai. Anybody else? That's right. Lot and his wife come with them. And all their herds and all that kind of stuff. Now, what is Lot to Abram? What's their relationship? It's his nephew. That's right. So, right. So, yeah, I can kind of imagine that Lot. Yeah, you can imagine that Lot, or that Abram, having no kids of his own, might have taken a fatherly role for Lot. Or at least Abram was the cool uncle. And Lot was like, you know what? I'd rather go with him. Maybe it was the opportunity to get out and expand a little bit. I don't know. Because interestingly, God doesn't tell Lot to leave. And he doesn't tell Abram to take Lot. But Lot just kind of like, yeah, I'm going. Is Lot, did Lot hear about this promise that God made to Abram and think, well, maybe that's me? I don't know. But one way or another, they leave together. And they're on their way, and they're in the land of Canaan, and a drought hits. Now, God is not recorded as telling Abram, leave the land I gave you and go to Egypt. But Abram does. Is he working against God's will? I don't know. Some commentators that I read said yes, this is a clear case of his, fearful disobedience or something like that. I don't know if that's true. But I do think it's interesting that the reason Abram went to Egypt was what? There's a famine where he was. So he goes to Egypt for a time, receives provisions. And after, we'll talk about the shenanigans in Egypt here in a moment, but after, he returns back to Canaan. Prosperous. If you know the story of the Bible a little bit, this happens again, not to Abram, but to the whole nation of Israel. Because of famine, they go to Egypt. And they're there for a time, and when they leave, they are much more prosperous than when they first entered. Interesting. So, Abram goes to Egypt with his wife, Sarai. I don't know how old Sarai is. It seems like she's probably post-menopause, right? Because they both have a hard time believing that she's going to have kids. She might be a bit younger than him, but I can't imagine there's more than 30 years difference or 40 years. I don't know how much gap you think you're going to. Nevertheless, she must be keeping up with her skincare regimen and diet and exercise, because apparently she is very beautiful. And as they go into Egypt, Abram is very concerned that they are going to so desire his wife that they will kill him and take her. Now, I don't know if that's how Egypt actually rolls. So Abram shows up. I'm going to guess not, based on how things go. So Abram shows up, and he's like, hey, everybody, I'm Abram, and this is my sister, Sarai. And Pharaoh's like, that's a good-looking woman. May I have her? To which Abram's like, sure. And because of that, because of Pharaoh's misconduct, which he's unwitting about, nevertheless it happens, God plagues Pharaoh. And it moves Pharaoh's heart, and he repents, and he's actually upset about this. He says, why did you tell me she's your sister? This is your wife. So, somehow God has Pharaoh's ear here in a way that will be less so when we get to the story of Moses. Different Pharaoh, different time, hundreds of years down the road. But anyways, so the truth comes out, and Pharaoh's like, you got to go. So they go back home, but with all sorts of, material wealth that Pharaoh had gifted him. And that brings us up to pretty much where we left off, I believe. So, Genesis chapter 13. So Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the Negev. Now, Abram was very rich in livestock, silver, and in gold. And he journeyed on from the Negev as far as Beth-el. By the way, Beth-el is Hebrew. It means the face of God. I'm sorry, the house of God. It means the house of God. these are probably future names for the places he's traveling to. Names that when the book is written, people could point at a spot on a map. But a lot of these names are anachronistic. They didn't have this name yet. And you'll see that in a little bit when we get to talk about some of the kings. We'll talk about some of the territories, and we'll say, yeah, they're from such and such. That is such and such, right? So he gives you the old name, and then he's like, that's modern day whatever. Like I was to say, Persia, which is to say modern day Iran. Or Siam, which, of course, we today now know as Thailand. Right? Same sort of idea. Is that right? Siam, Thailand? I think that's right. Come on, you've seen The King and I. No? Okay. All right. Bethel, where his tent had been in the beginning. So he's back to where he started before he left for the drought. Between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had made an altar at the first. And there Abram called upon the name of the Lord. We spent a little bit of time talking about that last week, that idea of calling upon the name of the Lord. I would say in a most primary sense, this is prayer, right? Maybe in a broader sense, we could talk about it being worship. And what was the name that he called? I do think it's probably the four-letter name which will later be given to Moses. But that's a digression. Actually, you know what? Let's hang on that for just a minute, because the question came up last week, and I didn't say this. It would be worth knowing that when Moses asks God, who do I say sent me? God says, tell them, I am. I don't think God was spinning up a name for the benefit of Pharaoh. Right? I think he's more likely telling Moses a truth that Moses simply didn't know. But that is a digression. And we'll maybe tackle some other time. Verse 5. And Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together. For their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time, the Canaanites and Perizzites were dwelling in the land. Now, let's go ahead and notice something here. There is a differentiation between what is Lot's and what is Abram's. They aren't acting like one household. They are acting like two households. They don't share in all things. But it does seem like maybe there's a somewhat equal divide. Seems like that's me reading into it. How does that happen? It seems to me, and again, I'm reading between the lines, so, proceed with caution. But it seems to me that probably Abram is sharing with Lot the benefits that he gets. But Lot doesn't treat it as if it's common. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. Which is now starting to cause friction between them. Now, not yet directly between Abram and Lot. It doesn't say that, but it does say between his herdsmen and Lot's herdsmen, right? So at least their respective employees are starting to butt heads. We're starting to learn, I think, when you look at it carefully, you're starting to learn a bit about Abram's character and Lot's character. And as stories progress, these are going to get more fleshed out and reinforced. We're seeing hints here, anticipations, and you're going to see more of this shortly. So, also, the mention of the Canaanites and Perizzites, what is that about? Not parasites. Perizzites. What is that about? Well, I think it could be one of two things. It could be either those Canaanites and Perizzites are limiting the space that they have to occupy, but I'm not sure it's that. Because they're just about to solve this problem by going separate ways. So presumably they've still got plenty of space if they spread out. But I think it might be talking about an implicit threat. We need to make sure that Abram and Lot aren't fighting because there are others around who would exploit them if they're divided. I don't know for sure. It's just one sort of almost throwaway line, but I think maybe that's more it, right? They need to stay peaceful and united because the wolves are at the door. Then Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I'll go to the right. If you take the right hand, then I'll go left." There's a practice that we do in my house sometimes when I'm going to share food with my son. Maybe you do it too. It's called I cut, you choose. Or you cut, I choose. Right? So let's say we've got not a piece of cake, that would be silly. A plate of spinach. Delicious chocolate spinach, right? And he can divide, and I'll pick which piece I want. Or, as usually happens, he asks me to divide, and then he picks, right? That actually puts a lot of pressure on the one who divides, because the whole point of a practice like this is it tries to keep both parties honest, right? The one who divides is going to try as best he can to make it very, very equal. Why? Right, which means if I divide unequally, then the other person will pick the bigger mound of spinach, right? Yeah, the German chocolate spinach. So it tries to ensure a fairness principle, which is, I'll work on my best to keep it fair, and then, trusting in your self-interest to rein me in. And that's kind of what's happening here. Abram basically says, okay, this line, do you want left or right? Take your pick, I'll take the other one. Now, I'm not sure that the cake is cut evenly. But you'll see, Abram is the peacemaker here, right? And he seems to be moving from a place of consideration for Lot. Like I said, the pressure is on the guy who does the cut, right? You actually want to be in the position of the one who chooses. And so that's what he does for Lot. He says, I'm going to do the cut, you do the choosing. Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. We in the business call that foreshadowing. So Lot chose for him all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east. Thus they separated from each other. All right. So Lot gets the option to choose. What does he choose? I mean, the east, right? But why does he choose the east? Yeah, it's the better land. From he's got the side with all the frosting. He's prioritizing himself, clearly. And what he's considering are, what are the material benefits? What's going to help me grow my wealth and make life easy for me? Now, it's unclear at this point if Lot knows about the people where he's going. The Bible's not clear about that. We won't be unclear for very long. So, Lot goes east. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. I do think it's interesting that it sounds like Abram's moving into space, whereas Lot is moving into where there are already people. Which is fascinating because the whole reason for the divide was we need space. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had separated with him, "Lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land that you see I will give you, and to your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one could count the dust of the earth, your offspring also could be counted. Arise, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I will give it to you." So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. Interesting, right? Where Lot goes, we can already presume, is into the land of deep idolatry and wickedness. But it looks to the eye like the prosperous way to go. Pleasing to the eye and also good for food. Right? Attracted to the people there too. Abram's choosing the road less traveled. But when he goes, he pitches a tent for himself and builds an altar to the Lord. So while Lot is moving into the land of wickedness and presumably idolatry, Abram is sort of consecrating the land to which he moves and dedicating it to the Lord. Let's go ahead and start in on chapter 14. In the days, y'all remember what I told you about when you get to the weird names in the Bible? This is what you do. In the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, and Cheddar Cheese, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim. Interestingly, Goyim is a Hebrew word. I didn't check the Hebrew text to make sure it's all the same letters. I'm pretty sure it is, though. Goyim is the word that will, in modern times, be representative of Gentile, right? Or the nations, right? Goy is nation. So interesting that it's that name. That might be just coincidental because of the sister languages around. These kings made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. And all these joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. Okay, throwing around a lot of big names, but what does this mean? We have a battle between 9 kings. We've got 5 kings versus 4 kings, and we'll hear about this more in a little bit. The Salt Sea, that's probably the Dead Sea, right? Every indication seems to point that Why is it called the Dead Sea, by the way? Because it's so salty, nothing lives in it. All right. So we've got, this isn't just, it's not uncommon for this king to raid that king's territory or whatever. That's not what this is. 12 years they had served Chedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him came and defeated Raphaim in Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzim in Ham, the Emim in Shava Kiriathaim, and the Horites in their hill country of Seir as far as El Paran on the border of the wilderness. They turned back and came to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and defeated all the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites who were dwelling in Hazazon Tamar. Okay, if we can get through the word soup there, what this is describing is a coalition of 5 kings just steamrolling the whole territory. Just everywhere they go, they're conquering people. Is this empire expansion? Something like that, maybe. You get this coalition, this axis of evil, right? And they are just beating everybody. So, then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, went out, and they joined the battle in the valley of Siddim with Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of Goim, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. So you can see what happened here. This coalition is very successful and very threatening, and so in response to that threat, these other kings then make their own block. And so now we're going to get these forces going to war. So this is probably war at an uncommon scale. Now, the Valley of Siddim was full of bitumen pits. And as the kings of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah fled, some fell into them, and the rest fled to the hill country. How did the resistance do? Right? These 4 kings rise up to fight the 5, and what's the first thing we hear about them? They're running away, yeah. And as they run, people are falling into tar pits. That's what's being described here as tar pits. Not how I want to go out, by the way. So the enemy took all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, who was dwelling in Sodom, and his possessions, and went their way. So now Lot and his family and all his possessions are being claimed as spoils for that 5-king coalition. That makes sense? Everybody understand what's happening here? As far as the narrative is concerned right now, Lot and all that he has is already the possession of Sodom. And so when Sodom and Gomorrah are routed, he and his are taken as spoils of war. Okay. This next paragraph is astounding. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, see, there we go, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol of Aner. These were allies of Abram. When Abram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men born in his house 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. Again, the land would not be called Dan yet, because Dan hasn't been born yet. But these are, future names to help people place the events. Also, I should note, whenever you're hearing these real names for the places that they're going, this should be a reminder to us that this isn't myth. It's history, right? Some people like to treat the Bible as if it's myth, but it's not myth in the sense that it's fictional. These stories really happened. All right, 15. And he divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and defeated them and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. Then he brought back all the possessions and also brought back his kinsman Lot with his possessions and the women and the people. Did you catch that? 4 kings with 4 armies can't stop the 5 kings with 5 armies. But Abram takes 318 men in the night and routs them. And they flee. This isn't even, it would be easy for me to picture that this is like special forces, like sneaking in and like capturing Lot and smuggling him out in the middle of the night. But that's not what happens. 318 men broken into some sort of divisions overcome the forces of 5 kings. Now, how did that happen? Well, you could say Abram had trained men. It's commandos, right? Musashi's like 1 man can defeat 10, right? And if 1 man can defeat 10, then 10 can defeat 100, right? Yeah, these are long odds. And yet, these are the same sorts of victories that we're going to see Israel have in taking Canaan under the leadership of Joshua. The same sort of victories that we're going to see David have, right? It's just not much is made of it. It's just sort of given to you as a fact. So Abram comes in, rescues Lot. Oh man, we're going to get into Melchizedek. Yeah, what the heck. If we go a little long, we'll go a little long. All right. So, after his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer, the kings who were with him, I still want to call him cheddar cheese. The kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shaveh, that is, the king's valley. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High. What? What does that even mean? They don't have a temple yet, as far as we know. Moses has not established the priesthood, right? As all that's given to him in Mount Sinai. And isn't Abraham like the only guy that believes in God? No, apparently not. So much so that this guy, Melchizedek, the king of Salem, is not only king, but also a priest of the Most High God. Jesus is pointed at as being the successor of Melchizedek. Because, in the lineage of Israel, nobody else serves as both priest and king until Jesus. And then he's the last of both, right? He is the high king forever and the great high priest. Now, we do say we are a priesthood of all believers, and absolutely, but right, He is the great high priest, making intercession between God and man. All right, so we get this figure, Melchizedek, and right next to him is the king of Sodom. So we get the one king who is firmly and clearly established as a king of righteousness and godliness. And beside him, the king of the city that the only thing we know about it so far is that it's full of wickedness. So Melchizedek blesses Abram and says, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." So we can see now that Melchizedek's putting a frame on what just happened. It wasn't Abram's might that won the day. It was the might of God who delivered the enemies into Abram's hand. And Melchizedek is offering a blessing to Abram and to God. And if you remember back to the promise that God made to Abram, he said, "I will make you a blessing to the whole world. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you." I don't know that Melchizedek knows all that. He's just doing what is right and proper. So he offers blessings over Abram and gives glory to God. And Abram gave him a tenth of everything. What is that biblical term of giving a tenth of what you have? Tithing. Yeah. He gives to Melchizedek a tithe. Why? And this is interesting because Moses has not given the Sinai law that demands a tithe be given to the priests. And yet Abram, encountering a priest of the Most High, gives to him a tithe. And the king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself." So Melchizedek came to bless Abram. The king of Sodom came to negotiate with him for the spoils of conquest. And on what grounds? Did he help Abram in the fight? Some of it was his, sure. But he had already lost. He had already fled. Yeah, there might be an implicit threat there. I mean, anytime a king is saying, "Hey, let's come to terms," there's some implicit leverage there, right? And you can see what's motivating the king of Sodom, right? He's not there to glorify God or even to thank Abram. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I have lifted my hand to the Lord, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I would not take a thread or a sandal strap or anything that is yours, lest you should say, 'I have made Abram rich.' I will take nothing but what the young men have eaten, and the share of the men who went with me. Let Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre take their share." Now, so this is interesting, right? So Abram's saying, of my allies, sure, let them have whatever they want, but I will personally not touch anything that is yours. And his rationale for this is interesting. In the first place, he doesn't want the king of Sodom to be able to point at Abram and say, "See the riches that I have lavished on him? See how I have blessed him?" Because he's not there to bless him. But also, his rationale is, "I have lifted my hand to the Lord, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth." In a very real way, he's saying, there is nothing that you can give to me because it's not yours. It's all God's. And I would rather receive from him what he deems right than from you what you deem is right. Also, by the way, is Lot being claimed as the people that the king of Sodom is asking for? Well, that's clear. One way or another, Abram, he says, we don't need any compensation. We just don't want to be billed for the food that we ate in this campaign. But otherwise, I do not want to be entangled with you. I do not want the kind of wealth that you have to offer. And if you look at how things went between Abram and Lot so far, Lot went where the Sodom wealth was, and it has not worked out for him well. Abram is willing to take the more righteous route and just depend upon God. We'll see how that works out for him. All right, we'll pick up Genesis chapter 15 next week. I got church coming up in exactly 6 minutes. So go freshen up your coffee and come on back.